Good evening. This is the Art Scene. I'm your host, Lila Snow. Tonight we have a special guest, the director of the MoCA Gallery in Georgetown, Dave Quammen. So thank you so much for being with us. Thank you for being a guest. So let's start with your background.
Well, that goes back to California. I had a lot of management and marketing and engineering responsibilities in Silicon Valley, before it was called Silicon Valley. And then I moved up to, owned a printed circuit board manufacturing business in the Sierra foothills. Lost a lot of money on that, so I came out here as a political activist on poverty issues from '93 to 2000, economic development concepts. And I got kind of bored, not bored, I didn't get bored at all, I got worn out from that, and so I needed to take a break from that.
And you're using your interest in that, using the gallery for projects, community projects.
Absolutely.
You have a homeless project?
If anybody has a worthy cause, or that I agree with them that's worthy, I'll give them space, free space in the gallery. I think I've done that for, I don't know, maybe 10 or 15 American University people have been there on poverty in India.
And you have some education projects with children?
Couple of high school. One was just a group doing photographs, and another was an organization that was trying to deal with the high school dropout rate. And they had, again, cameras and photography. And it's an interesting, you never know what will happen when you get involved in something. Right. But one young man took a picture of a big ceiling tile in one of the schools, and it was down like this, and I don't know how long it had been there. But he took a picture of that, and he entered that into, and I'll be darned if they didn't use that on the flashboard or whatever, the big sign, New York City and Times Square. And here's his picture rolling along with all the big stuff.
That's action. Well, WPA for a while had a project of giving inner city kids cameras, and then we had an exhibition of what they did. So
the American University group sent cameras over to students in India, and they had a big. And then another thing involving cameras was during the Arab Spring.
Oh yeah.
A group from representing Yemen and I can't remember what else.
Syria.
But anyway, Syria, right? Well, they came in and they had pictures. Some of them from Syria had to be smuggled out, but it was women taking pictures of the devastation and all of the things going on with that.
So MoCA used to be, it's a wonderful space in Georgetown, that in a courtyard just off 31st Street. And so in 2005 you took over. How did that come about?
Well, when I decided to take a break from my poverty activism, political activism, there was a piece in the paper about nude drawings in a bar. So I contacted that lady. She said, well, if you haven't modeled, I can't use you. And I kept pestering her. She finally gave me some contacts. So on Halloween Day, after I'm turning 60, I had my first modeling. I enjoyed it, but whenever I enjoy something, it's like a bull in a china shop. I just go for it. And so what I did was the artist would tell me how lousy models were, and I thought, well, art models. But then what I found out was that it was really the art community that was at fault, because they were saying that models wouldn't show up on time, couldn't hold a pose if they knew what one was. Well, all of that was because they'd put an ad in the city paper, and they'd hire anybody that agreed to take their clothes off in front of people. Models. So, and no instruction. So there was a disconnect, and the artist didn't seem to take to the models, and there wasn't a communication. And so I thought, if I organized the models, I could implement some changes through that.
Was this your first interaction with artists?
No, I had a little with my printed circuit board manufacturing business. I got involved with some artists to do some work. I did that, but wasn't a business venture. So, but anyway, I did a newsletter, Artists and Models, for about 6 months. That got me a lot of notoriety. It was really a great one, well received.
I remember the city paper wrote up something.
Oh, I've been written up in the city paper about 5 or 6 times.
Well, let's go back to the new innovations. You're changing the lobby.
Well, actually, I took it over in January 2005. The owner, the founder of it, was going to close it down December.
Michael Clark.
Michael Clark.
Yes.
Clark now, he's now Clark Fox. He changed his name. Anyway,
and you mentioned Lillian.
Well, the changes that I felt that he was going to close it, but I needed it for the Figure Models Guild that I had organized. That had grown to be a very popular thing. And so when he said he was going to close it, I told him I'd guarantee the rent and run the place. Well, I took over January 2005, and the changes that I started making was to clean it up and move around things. And over the time that I've had it, it's always in a continuous evolution. Mm-hmm. And the latest iteration is last June, Lillian Milgram, who's an international artist and a journalist, and she writes for something called thegreatnude.tv. So she interviewed me, and that came out in June. And given her reputation, she was born in Paris, she lived in Australia, she lived in Israel, and now the United States. And I thought if I could get her to some involvement with her, that would add another plus to the gallery. And so she said, well, the policy with MoCA is that if you want your art to be seen by others, I'll show it. It's the only gallery that is so open to new talent, and I don't do juried shows. Well, I didn't, but I asked Lillian if she would participate, and she said, well, not with the way it is now. And other artists have said that too, the fact that I don't jury shows. So I said, well, I'll change that, and you can have the lobby, and you can have up front, and that's how the up front.
Oh,
now it's up front.
Up front at MoCA.
Yes.
And you have a black and white show coming up.
I have a new exhibit every month, and I put out a call for artists and people that respond.
Do you have to be a member?
No, you don't have to be a member.
So what about this membership thing?
Well, that's people have been slowing down in even with the nominal fees I charge. The economy just isn't treating art very well.
Especially artists.
Yes.
They always feel it first.
Yes.
I always remember having grown up in New York about how an area becomes very desirable because there are artists, but then people come in and it becomes too expensive for artists. So the very thing that made it desirable raised the prices and pushed out what was considered desirable. So you recently had a show that included Brooklyn artists from Bushwick. So how do you get artists from out of town?
That one came through Lillian.
I see.
When I told her that I'd let her curate a show and jury it in the lobby, I made some changes to the lighting and a few other things. It looks very different now. But she put out a call and advertised in magazines, and she knew the artist,
David
Maidman. And so he submitted a piece, and she accepted that, and others. So that was up, and
But the show had artists from all over? Or
Israel, from Paris.
So it's really become an international space.
It always has been, but this emphasized it because Lillian has an international flair. And so it's what
Is it mostly figurative work?
No, there are 3 shows that are figurative. March is erotic, July is a celebration of the figure, and November is heads or tails, and that's portraits or tasteful backsides.
Well, I wanted to get to the fact that you do nude shows because I was really surprised at how conservative Washington is. You'd think cutting edge, the seat of government, and the fact that there was that uproar and that Corcoran reneged on the promise of showing Mapplethorpe, and then at the time I was on the board of Washington Project for the Arts, and we showed it, but they didn't have the staff, so the board was the staff, and we had lines around the block. And do you think it's evolved since then? That was quite a while ago,
well,
as far as being open to.
It's probably the most conservative liberal city around.
Really?
And the conservatism really gets into figurative work. I emphasize or have a special place for figurative work through my experience as a model.
Yes.
And early on, a friend told me, what we need is a place to show our art. And that was, he was painting.
What are just mention the next few shows because we only have a minute.
Oh,
so
okay.
What's
well,
coming up?
Coming up, June is going to be an open, mixed show. July is a celebration of the figure, and that's one of our big ones. So it's also the anniversary of the Figure Models Guild, which is 11 years now. So what I've been doing, what I've been trying to do is to let people know how much academia is into a figurative work.
Right.
I put out a book recently, The Nude in D.C., the figurative art scene in Washington, D.C.
We have to get that on the crawl, where to get your book. But do you have a night of an opening reception?
The opening reception for the next show will be June 1st, and that's 6 until 8 or 9, and they're always free.
Wonderful.
And I've been not charging submissions for entries into the shows, too. So.
Wonderful. Well, this has been so exciting, and thank you so much for being my guest. And I'll see you next time on the art scene. This is Lila Snow.